How susceptible are humans to genetic influences? If you said a lot, then congrats, you are actually paying attention to how life fundamentally works. I'm proud of you. You know that, right? Anyhow, all of life with its instructions and parameters are mostly based on one thing: DNA. Contained within this coding is how you will look, how tall you will be, such as the Chad 5'3" height, how much muscle you can gain, immunological functioning, and virtually everything associated with nature rather than nurture. And while this has worked for quite a while, humanity are the masters of FAFO. As a scientist attempts to teleport between pods and send humanity into a revolutionary era of science, the experiment would first result in a baboon turning inside out and then bad-tasting steak. Getting hammered one night after suspecting his romantic intentions were actually going to visit an old boyfriend, he would send himself through as the tequila whispers hilarious things, and if you listen, you're an idiot. However, a fellow animal would be in the pod with him, resulting in a horrific fusion. So the questions remain. How feasible is this, and how was the human genome impacted in specific areas, resulting in this creature? Let's discuss that in today's episode. We kick off our story with the title card, The Fly, in case you were confused on what you were watching. I don't know why I'm going after you. This channel literally dies if you don't watch. Truly, biting the hand that feeds aside, people have been asking me to actually cover this for a while, for like hundreds of years now, which means invariably this could either be awesome or a complete crapshoot like the Alien episode. I choose to believe it's gonna crush. As we see a bunch of people walking in the background of red, blue, and green, we are at a gala of sorts. Dr. Ian Malcolm here is working on something that will allegedly change the world. I always thought Jeff Goldblum's acting was just supposed to be him in Jurassic Park, but evidently this is just Jeff Goldblum. And currently, we are getting peak Goldblum, whatever. What a time to be alive. Is it Goldblum or Goldblum? Let's find out. After conferring with the superiors of this channel, which is Google search, I guess, it's Goldblum. Anyways, as he talks to the ghost from Beetlejuice, nobody can see her. Don't worry, her name is currently irrelevant, as her real name will pop up later. He won't divulge his invention because there are too many eavesdropping scientists in the area. Correct. Continuing on about his home, he makes a pass saying, well, you should come back to my lab and we can try some coffee. I've used that line myself. A little more difficult to get them past security though, so I guess we would just have to settle for my garage or something. And it works just as well as it did here. Typically, they just kind of walk away. Unlike me, however, Pete Goldblum seals the deal because Pete Goldblum. The ghost gives him a ride back to an abandoned factory, which would be sketch as all get out. Like Stranger Danger sort of vibes here. Walking inside the murder factory, she has entered his apartment where, luckily for her, he's not a serial killer. And instead, he goes in and plays the piano. Looking around, she's spooked as he says it's too late. She's already seen the area. He can't let her leave alive. Uncovering the prototype, he has two others set up as he calls them telepods. What a dork! She asks what the phone booths do as he asks for something uniquely hers, and that's on her, and so she's like, oh, here, have my pantyhose, as they send it through the pod. I actually went on a date recently, and I've come to the conclusion Pete Goldblum actually is onto something here. He just has a different type of game that he runs. I ask people, would you rather have an 800-pound leg and walk to work every day, or hands constantly itching but you get $10 every minute? I mean, don't get me wrong, the date went well, but interesting model. Anyways, I should build a telepod first before, doing anything in the future. Of course, it's so simple. Why didn't I think of this? Placing the hose in the telepod, he then puts in a voice code and begins the teleportation sequence. As it runs, it then sends it to the next pod. Now, that seems pretty just like, oh, of course, but that is teleportation achieved, which one must ask a philosophical question. Are you still the same person? Okay, it's time for a tangent. I know, everybody's favorite time. So you just imagine, if you will, take getting knocked out, for instance. Is one stream of consciousness that has never been interrupted, like sleeping doesn't even interrupt your consciousness, it never stops. But one thing to know is, interestingly, when you are knocked unconscious, would you really wake back up as the same person? This concept can be applied here also to teleportation, I believe. The thing is, you have to be broken down at an atomic level and then rebuilt on the other side. So the reality is, you are actually not the same person. You are an interpretation of the same person. Granted, the new you wouldn't know a difference, but you are completely new atoms, and the connections had to be reforged. But therein lies the other interesting idea. It's actually pretty much stated that every 7 years or so, almost every cell in your body is renewed, I guess is the best way to put it, except for your neurons. But about 98% of your atoms are replaced every single year. So are you the same person you were a year ago, 10 years ago, at the beginning of your life? And how would you even know if you were different? Because all you can really think of is yourself now. And that is with your current self. And this is actually why I believe to a degree people can change, not just on a cellular level, but also on an atomic level. And I guess that could also influence a behavioral level as well, within reason. We just simply are not the same creatures that we were 10 years ago. Then the question really becomes, given this is not a slow process over the course of, say, like a year, but of seconds, you are composed of new atoms entirely. Same connections and setup, new being. Of course, that then brings in the idea of the body simply being a conduit for consciousness. I know, here comes Roanoke talking about bodies and consciousness again, but in this instance, all it would be is the same hardware set to the same frequency, picking up the same consciousness as before. Like an old radio is broken and destroyed, and the new radio is tuned to that same frequency. The fly raises some pretty interesting implications for what humanity is beyond just a flyboy. Anywho, of course, she's not impressed at first with his invention, real. Opening up the pod, it is in fact her stalking, as she doesn't believe it. She says she doesn't get it. Well, it's teleportation. I mean, surely that shouldn't be that hard to grasp, though the science behind it would be extremely hard to grasp.
What's up, nerds? It's your favorite cult leader back at it again. Bossman is on the road, so he told me to cover a mistake he did in the sponsor. Speaking of, this episode is sponsored by Groons.
As winter starts to creep in because apparently it showed up all at once, you know what that means. You're probably just going to go overeat, stay inside, and not focus on those gains or your health. Well, you could do one thing to offset this, eat nutrients, and that's where Groon comes into play. Groons are a convenient and comprehensive formula packed into a snack pack a day, and it's not just like a multivitamin or a greens gummy or a prebiotic. It's actually all of those things for a fraction of the price, and they taste great, like they really do. You can get a snack pack. It's not just one, and again, I'm not gonna lie to you, I actually do enjoy eating these things. They taste really good. Being absolutely vegan, nut-free, gluten-free, dairy-free, and with no synthetic sweeteners or dyes, they contain over 20 vitamins and minerals and 60 ingredients that are nutrient-dense. Genuinely, I have no idea how they made them taste this good, but I do love them. I used to kind of take something else, but I'm currently switching over to these now. Plus, the vitamins being 100% of your needed amount and minerals being around 25% for like your daily intake. That means you're getting exactly what you need, and along with that, the nutrients themselves are methylated, which means they are more bioavailable for your body. So like for reference on this channel, cyanocobalamin is a synthetic form of B12, which is very prevalent in all multivitamins and actually causes me migraines, but methylcobalamin does not. So if you're ready to integrate a delicious snack pack and nutrients as well as vitamins into your day, shop Groon's best sale of the year. Just click the link below in the description. Turning on her tape recorder, she then asks him how he did it alone. He has been outsourcing some things, but nobody really knew what this project was for. Changing out the tape, Pete Goldblum then tells her she can't write about this, as she admits she's one of the most horrific things imaginable, a journalist. Running after her, she then bails out. The next day, the ghost and her boss then listen to the tape, but really, nothing is on the tape, and it's all based on the ghost's word. He assumes it's a nightclub routine, as Pete Goldblum has now shown up. Letting Pete Goldblum and the ghost use his office, Pete Goldblum is confused, as he wasn't impressed by the tape. Weird. He then asks her out for a cheeseburger, as he tells her he's still missing a few key things. He can only teleport inanimate objects, nothing living, as she says she deserves it, and she should be able to tell everyone. God, I hate you. Bro, okay, look, journalists, I believe, used to be important, and I'm sure there's still journalists out there that are, fighting the good fight on that one. But most journalists are just kind of craptacular, and they don't really do anything except just drive division. When are they gonna start going to like the asylums in like Outlast and doing that again? Now it's just like, oh, I don't know, this dude took a dump in his backyard and it was red versus blue. Some stupid crap like that. Anyways, so he makes her a deal. He will let her tell the story, I guess, but he needs to teleport actual living creatures first, otherwise this could be a problem. So heading home, the ghost is assassinated. Thank God, no, I wish, it would be great. Instead, it's her ex-boyfriend, or ex-boss friend actually, taking a shower in her apartment. He claims she unconsciously wants her to come back. He confronts her about Pete Goldblum, as he then says he's actually brilliant. Well, maybe you should talk to him. Asking for a key, Bossman then keeps the key and then leaves, which will now force her to change the locks. Real. Back over at Murder Factory, Pete Goldblum then sends a baboon through the teleporter as it becomes a mass of meat strings vaguely shaped like a baboon. Tough break. Doing an interview after that, Pete Goldblum is thinking, well, that didn't work, as the baboon was turned inside out. The computer only knows what he tells it to know, so he must have failed somehow. As a result, he doesn't want to talk about it. And then heading back to his pull-out couch, that's the only thing that's going to be pulling out in this Murder Factory, you'll come to find. Anyways, checking his closet, he then has 5 sets of the exact same clothes, as he doesn't expend any thought about, changing his clothes. Brother, I have more clothes than that, and I tell you, I expend literally 0 thought on what I'm going to wear. I just grab jeans, a shirt, and socks. It's that easy. The ghost brought over some steaks, as she says he's cute and makes money moves on him because, It's going well. Making out backwards, because that's the thing to do, Pete Goldblum then receives a peak injury from a microchip. That looks incredibly painful. Apparently the ghost wants to eat him up, as Pete Goldblum then asks if she wants to try an experiment. Dangerous turns. Anyways, cutting the steak in two, he then sends one steak through the teleporter as then he cooks the other. As it emerges, he cooks that one too and then feeds it to the guinea pig. The first one tastes like a steak. No way. The second one tastes wrong, according to her. Congrats. You now have a prion infection on that one. Whew. It's gonna catch up to you pretty soon. She claims it tastes synthetic, and the computer is translating the flesh and then spitting out what it thinks is going on, but there is something getting lost in translation. Going to tell the computer to stop being a huge dork, the ghost is now feeling Pete Goldblum as she gets in her car. Who isn't? However, as she leaves, Boss Man is there watching her, just waiting outside, like a weirdo. Bro, listen, man. You're only hurting yourself. So going to find Pete Goldblum some more clothes, she then runs into Boss Friend. That's why you never mix business with pleasure. He then is upset about the whole thing, thinking they were going to get back together. You should never assume that. As he does this bowing thing, yeah, bro, that'll show her. Not weird at all in the store. Back over at Murder Factory, they then send a baboon number 2 through, which then explodes. That doesn't explode. Opening the door, it runs out and jumps on Pete Goldblum. Not gonna lie, that thing running at me with those big of teeth would freak me out. Unpredictable behavior. I don't like it. No thanks. So raising a toast to the fact that Pete Goldblum will never get motion sickness again, they then, toast. Oh, I should probably explain that joke. You see, he's teleporting instead of taking a plane. Sending the baboon out for a test to make sure it was okay, the ghost now wants to go on holiday with Pete Goldblum as he wants to know if they are having a romance. She's like, yeah, we're having a romance. And he says, well, I have a great idea. Let me call up a restaurant then. Then the ghost finds a picture that was created as apparently as personal, as the ghost is like, whoa, Pete Goldblum, you need to not rush it. Okay. Well, that's a bit of a mixed signal, don't you think? So, the mixed signal ghost then goes to talk to the ex-boss friend as they argue about the discovery and how mixed signals is in the middle of it. Ex-boss friend really doesn't want her to disappear from his life, but the best thing you can do is go complete no contact and move on with your life and make them disappear from your life. It's kind of a waste of energy otherwise. Pete Goldblum is putting together the pieces, expositioning the crap out of this baboon, which I do this to my cats, as the main character finally shows up 35 minutes into the movie. The fly has arrived. Saying screw it, the baboon continues destroying things as the fly is enclosed in the case with Pete Goldblum. The baboon checks on him as they are both teleported to the other pod. This raises an interesting question about the metaphysical nature of if you are, again, deconstructed and reconstructed, is it life or memories? Are you really yourself or a replication? It's actually really hard to tell because you were most definitely killed in that process. Mixed Signals then returns to the apartment, waking up Pete Goldblum. She tells them she came back. Yeah, okay, well, door's over there, I suppose. She's informed he went through with the experiment as Pete Goldblum then confronts her about her ex-boss friend. He is told that he doesn't have to be jealous. He's just an old boyfriend. And then she's like, well, of course I still love him. Yeah, that's very reassuring. Anyways, the door's over there. Blowing backs out on the pull-out couch, Pete Goldblum then catches a fly in midair like a Giga Chad, as then he gets up and shows how he has become Peaker Goldblum. Surely this will last forever, as he becomes the peakest Goldblum imaginable. Nothing could go wrong. As he does a gymnast routine, yeah, brother here is pretty strong. That level of muscular control is not just being strong, there's like a lot more to it. Mind-body connection, neurons, all that fun stuff. The next day, actually it is fun stuff. The next day, after the display of power, they then run into Cartman as Peaker Goldblum then buys Mixed Signals a necklace. No, brother, don't invest. Mixed Signals are a red flag, not a green one. As then they stop off at a coffee shop, Peaker Goldblum is eating sugar with his coffee, and he has never really given himself a chance to be himself. He appears to be suffering from a bit of mania, and it also seems as though the pod purified him in his mind, and then they head back to Murder Factory and dehydrate one another for quite a while, as evidently they have been going at this for hours. Feeling Peaker Goldblum's back, he has some really coarse hairs. Well, don't we all? Peaker Goldblum then appears to be degrading somewhat concerning skin health, as then he goes into the fridge and starts eating ice cream. Mixed Signals then cuts his back hair. Thanks, honey. Becoming manic, Mixed Signals really doesn't want to go through the teleporters. Peaker Goldblum tells her she's a drag and how he's going to go find someone else to be a part of the dynamic duo. Mixed Signals suggests maybe something went wrong. You think so? Have you seen his skin? Heading to a random bar, I can tell you, you're not going to find your other half of the dynamic duo situation here with a random chick at the bar. I'm just being totally serious. Meeting up with a woman, two dudes are arm wrestling over there as Peaker Goldblum gets kind of involved in it and bets $100. Commencing the arm wrestling, dude never drank his milk as a kid as his forearm snaps like a twig. Also, why are you so sweaty, man? Taking Sweet D home from the bar, she wants to go to a few more bars. Again, I don't know if this is just the time frame, but every woman here is completely unbothered by what is like appearing to be legitimately a serial killer behavior. Like, I've been on dates, and it's like, I'm just vibing out, being a Chad, making jokes, and they're like, are you trying to kill me? It's like, what? No! That's crazy. Why would you even suggest that? I'm so offended. That doesn't sound right, probably coming... Anyways, my face is very sarcastic. Picking up Sweet D, he then runs her upstairs as Peter Goldblum twice bakes by going through the teleporter once more, and then they smash again. So basically, it just resets the refractory period. And if you need to know what that is, basically, it's like the 12 to 15 minutes when your body doesn't want to really it also depends on like a wide swath of things. Like, you know what? Go ask your parents, even though most of my audience is above the age of 18. Later, Sweet D then asks about breakfast, as she says she doesn't want to go through that teleporter. Understandable. At this point, Peter Goldblum is degrading somewhat as his skin hurts and his muscles ache, as he's not doing too well, and he's fatigued and has a persistent cough and body lesions. Dragging her over to the teleporter, though, Mixed Signals then comes back. Man, does nobody change the locks around here? Claiming Mixed Signals is his mom, Sweet D then leaves, because it's like clearly his girlfriend, and telling degraded Goldblum he is looking bad. He smells bad. He has weird hairs on his back. His hairline's receding. You have a booger in your nose. Basically, she just keeps blasting him. She then says that the hair that was growing on his back, she had it analyzed, and apparently it must have been insect. Telling him something must have happened, he says, oh, you're just jealous. He then punches his murder factory for a second, saying, is this what a sick man does? Yeah, probably, bro. Kicking her out, well, I guess that's the end of that romance. It's like when you choose the wrong option with Tali in Mass Effect and she doesn't want to talk to you anymore. Like when you're trying to romance her, legitimately, not gonna lie to you, I did that one time because I'm like, oh, I'll go with Miranda. Like, that'll work. Maybe I thought I could go back. Anyways, realized I couldn't. Reset my game back 4 hours of progress because I am not an idiot. Tally best girl. Also, degraded Goldblum is now leaking from his fingers and losing fingernails. Ugh. Wondering if he's dying. Yeah, I would probably wonder the same thing, but no, you're just changing. Going back to the computer, he then identifies that there was another being in the pod with him, a fly, the main character. And on a genetic and molecular level, he has been fused with the fly. He has become the Fly Bloom. Well, not yet. He's only degraded Goldblum at this current point. He hasn't put enough points into the Fly Bloom category. Calling up an ex-girlfriend, you gotta be truly desperate to come to her for help. Telling her he's gotten worse, she then asks if she can help him, and he's like, I need you to come see me. Now, that was quick. All right, so Flybloom then comes out on double canes, looking a little worse for wear. He says he's diseased and could be contagious. Okay, well, thanks for inviting me over then. His skin is starting to molt off of his body, and it appears as maybe things aren't going to go so well for him, as he informs her a fly got into the transmitter pod and how he has been fused with it. So the teleporter is now a fantastic gene splicer. He's the offspring of Brundle and a housefly, a frundle, a bry. His cells are in chaos, and he will degenerate and die, at least what he thinks. Spitting up a bunch of fluid, his ears then fall off next as he says he's scared. Yeah, brother, I'd be scared as well. Mixed Signals then runs back to her ex-boss friend as he tells her not to go back to him, but she needs to, evidently. He then tells her she needs to clean her body because she may be sick, as ex-boss friend then tells her to tape him so he can see what has become a fly bloom. Heading back to Murder Factory, she then enters his apartment and finds he's crawling on the ceiling. His body is changing as if his disease has a purpose. Mixed Signals then says she can't stay as Flybloom then says, yeah, you can. Nuh-uh. He's turning into a 185-pound fly. He claims he's turning into a Brundlefly. No, a Flybloom, like I've been saying. Setting up a camera, she then starts filming as Flybloom says he breaks down food with corrosive enzymes as his teeth are useless, so he just sucks up the food. Mixed Signals now comes back and cries in the bathroom of her apartment. She is pregnant as ex-boss friend is upset at this news. He then asks her what she wants to do about it as, she doesn't want a kid that's half Mixed Signals, half Goldblum, half fly. Don't do the math on that one. Taking her to the hospital, she's already having the offspring, as then they go to push the thing out, which, as it appears, it's a larva. Waking back up, that was just a middle finger to the audience. None of that ever happened. Later, Flybloom is attempting to undo the fly DNA, it seems, as the computer no longer recognizes his voice pattern as Flybloom's teeth are starting to fall out. I had a dream I lost teeth last night. Disturbing. Putting his teeth in with the other portions of his body that have fallen off that are no longer useful, he claims. Mixed Signals then returns to vibe out with Flybloom. Asking her what she wants, she says she wanted to see him before he drops off. Flybloom then says he wants to become the first insect politician. He accepts he's an insect, apparently, who dreamt he was a man, but now he is awake, and he will hurt her this day if she doesn't leave, because insects are brutal. Brotherman is absolutely losing it. Going back outside, Mixed Signals says she couldn't tell Flybloom. Ex-Bossman says to give it a few days on whatever that thing is in there, but she wants to go get rid of it. Meanwhile, Flybloom watches from the roof, going to talk to a guy named Brent. Mixed Signals wants to get rid of the offspring as it could be deformed. There is no test which will prove or disprove if the offspring will be normal, so she just wants to move ahead. As she sits there, though, Flybloom arrives and grabs her before noping out of there with her. Setting her down the rooftop, he says what she has is all that's left of the real him, as she says she can't, but he's like saying, too bad. The villain arc begins, I suppose. Meanwhile, ex-boss friend shows up to the murder factory. Does nobody lock doors around here? Finding it completely trashed, he then puts together man's answer to the Fly menace. And I break away only to tell you the meter is in fact still running. A larger version of the salt shotgun. Going to the computer, he sees the gene splicing methodology. However, here's Flybloom. Jumping down on them, he then melts ex-boss friend's hand to a nub as he starts spitting corrosive enzymes all over his body, breaking off his foot. Ouchies! Moving to his head, Mixed Signals then tells him not to melt his face off like in that one movie Face Off, as Flybloom then asks to help him be human once more. Basically, he wants to fuse together into one being. You know, more human DNA sort of scenario. Bro, you're just gonna create a Cronenberg monster. Good God. He then says they will be the ultimate family joined together. Freaking out, Mixed Signals then tears off Flybloom's jaw as his whole body starts coming apart, because apparently that was a load-bearing jaw, as he goes full-on Fly. Throwing her into the pod, ex-boss friend then grabs the force multiplier as a Fly, I said it apparently, then heads into the pod. Getting in, ex-boss friend severs the connection as the Fly then steps back out, but gets quasi-teleported in the process. Letting Mixed Signals out next, the Fly is then sent over to the other pod as he emerges, but he's been fused with a piece of the telepod. How? Well, you know, I don't know. You think there would be some sort of protocol here that could delineate between flesh and machine? I guess not. So just put that thing out of its misery. Being half man, half fly, half machine, I've already used that joke, it's clear he wants to be taken out. Mixed Signals then grabs the handheld, take him out already. Finally choosing which signal she wants to land on, she domes the cybernetic Fly and thus concludes the Fly. Hey, that just ends there? It just cuts to black mid-sentence. Hello and welcome to the science portion. Why I started saying that, I really have zero clue. No, I know. It's because I started writing the science the next day in order to give my brain a chance to digest the material, much like an ex-boss friend's leg and potentially face if Mixed Signals hadn't stepped in. Okay, so the questions are actually kind of self-answering for the most part, as actually the movie does a fantastic job of discussing this, but as always, it is kind of an excuse to get into the genetics and attempt to understand just exactly what is going on here. And I discussed the philosophical implications of teleportation, but I think we should move there first and then discuss what exactly is going on with the Brundlefly genetics, because what we were looking at is what could be considered a perfect hybridization of genetics coupled with cellular differentiation as well as cellular turnover. What exactly does that mean? Well, let's get into it so I don't sound like a rambling mad scientist. A little late in the game for that, I suppose. So we sort of ran this down, but I think we really need to get into the actual biophysics, weird word, not even sure if that's real, of this, because there are realities that must be teased apart, much like the human meat suit, in order to explain exactly what is going on here. So for this thing to actually work properly, the important aspect is to remember you're completely ripped apart on an atomic basis. This, for all intents and purposes, literally kills you. There is no way that it couldn't. Your heart and brain are torn apart piece by piece. Now, it appears to happen relatively quickly. There is actually some Instagram reel I've seen about a guy who's getting his brain mapped out to upload his consciousness. And in order to do so, his brain has to actually be physically destroyed and then read, as then he starts bleeding out of his eyes or something. Unpleasant situation, but that is exactly the case here as well. When you are teleported, what is uploaded is simply an interpretation of your body. As your machine scans and breaks down everything on an atomic level, the reality of what is taking place is that your cells, they're not being put back together. The raw material is analyzed, and for it to be instantaneous as it is, even if the pods are close, the raw material never arrives at the second pod. So essentially, you are gone. You are the leftover sifted material that has been analyzed, that, I don't know, probably the cleanup process would basically be just you being vaporized. What comes out of the pod is a rebuilding of you. To this end, you are just ones and zeros sent through the wiring, which is just raw information. So it's not even really instant teleportation unless it's like on a quantum level using, what is it, like Hawking radiation or something, where it's like particles that come in and out of existence. Well, and then, yes, Hawking radiation is the one where particles come in and out of existence, and then one gets sucked into the black hole and the other goes away. Anyways, there's an idea that maybe we could communicate utilizing that. This would really just be the speed of light because it's just information being sent through wires. Anyways, utilizing atoms on the other side, you are functionally rebuilt with the same structure of your brain, same amount of cells, same genetic coding, and on that side, you would really have never known that you were any different. But the reality of what has happened is, yeah, you just straight up died, big dog. That thing that is built after the fact is not you, but just atoms stacked together to literally be an interpretation of you. Now the question is raised, okay, well if your atoms are you and those are changed out every year basically, is anything really us? Well, no. And to further that, it then appears to not only be a great splicer, we're just gonna move past that philosophical question on that one, we're never ourselves. Life is strange. Anyways, this thing is a fantastic splicer, but it also seems to kind of confirm that consciousness itself does, in fact, possibly not stem from the brain, but from something else given the uninterrupted nature, even though you most definitely died doing this. Because of this interesting implication, Brundlefly just confirmed possibly an expression of a higher self, or possibly a being, and then inadvertently turned himself into a flyboy, so he never actually got to learn that aspect. Now, some of you are going to say, well, why, if it's just because of his brain being the exact same that continued on, why couldn't his consciousness? And I would suppose that's actually a pretty valid counter argument, but I'm also looking at this from the perspective of dying and being rebuilt to become something that is capable of displaying the exact cognitive patterns you had prior. What does that mean? Well, let me put it this way. Behavior, memories, thoughts, they're all a result of electrochemicals in the brain, firing neurons, hormones getting involved, and well, I guess I already said it, but neurotransmitters. The interesting aspect of that is, if you have a brain that is just rebuilt to be what it is, would it still have these same firing patterns given it has already been completely interrupted and then destroyed? After all, memories are just several neurons tied together that fire in a very specific way that makes you think, oh yeah, I remember that. And that's why you can almost remember something sometimes, because some of the pattern is firing in a way that makes you feel like you remember it, but it's not complete, so you don't truly remember it. The human brain is an absolutely wild organ, but that's the point, and I know this is kind of more of a thought experiment here than like actual science, so we're gonna get to the science in a second, but this is the nature of things in this channel. It just seems like when it comes to this particular rebuilding event that the connections are there, but how would this brand new brain actually be primed to fire these correctly to remember the things that he needs to remember or value the things that he needs to value? So again, seems like to me that this is a situation of the brain being a conduit for consciousness rather than a harbinger of said consciousness. Simply a radio tuned to the Brundle frequency where he receives his piece of the consciousness pie, I guess you could say. But that's all well and good, and I'm glad we could get into that. But now we need to sort of talk about this actual process. Also, let me know down in the comments what you think about that discussion, because I always like talking about it. I don't know if you guys like listening about it. So is the brain a conduit? Like, this is the question. Is the brain a conduit or something more? Because even connecting that to the real world, how could we ever even really know? All we truly know is the brain lights up in a large capacity when certain things go down, and then boom, you start thinking. I mean, I remember being a kid, I think it was like 3, I was asking my dad, oh hey, can we go to the pool? And he's like, I suppose. That is my first memory. That's when my consciousness clicked on, and I have no idea why. Anyway, so back to the main character, the fly. Oh, then I guess Brundle or whatever. So here's what you need to know about flies and humans. We are remarkably similar in terms of genetic complexity. Humans have roughly 20,000 to 25,000 genes, and this is what makes up the genetic structure and houses everything that makes us human. Sure, some things are learned, and back in the day I had to argue with a psychologist about this aspect, but nature is foundational. Nurture is altering. At least, that's my stance as a biologist. They believe the opposite. So when you look at a fly's genetic profile, they contain roughly 14,000 to 15,500 genes, which it's a fraction of the size of humans. Bit strange, isn't it? You may be tempted to think that larger, animals, and specifically us, I mean, surely we need astronomically more genes, right? Well, the reality is that's not exactly true. In fact, hilariously, humans and flies share an incredible amount of genetic information with one another. About 60 to 70% of a fly's genetic material has a human counterpart known as a homologue. The reasoning behind this is that we think there must have been like a common ancestor according to the theory of evolution. The other interesting aspect is given that we share this much genetic information with one another, roughly 75% of human diseases actually translate directly to flies as they are susceptible to similar infections. As a result, it's not just mice that are used to test medications and potential disease capabilities, but flies as well. So mad props to them. Thanks, flies. So it is this genetic similarity that the issues arise, and specifically what we see with Brundle, and for this, we need to learn about cellular differentiation and the Hox genes. Stem cells, which I did not mention just now, are something that if you are even vaguely interested in biology, you probably heard about. But down to their core, these are what are known as undifferentiated cells. Your body is actively creating stem cells currently and will send them to repair parts of your body as well as like your brain or spinal cord. It has been noted that in traumatic brain injuries in particular that the body will have stem cells leave either like the bone marrow, fat, skin, and also other areas of the brain and go to the area of damage in order to assist. How it works is that these cells exist around, let's say damaged neuronal tissue. The environment will then begin to alter them. While not 100% assured, stem cells in this instance will actually begin changing into neurons by existing around other neurons. Internal activation will begin to respond through the persistence of external stimuli. As this happens, it lets the cell know what it should actually specialize into, and in this process, certain genes would be switched off, and then some would be activated. Ultimately, for something like brain damage, this would be invaluable as it could bridge the gap between the damaged cells that may have been quite literally sheared or destroyed by the impact, and the brain is having issues connecting to the other side. And while it may not be perfect, this may allow for some level of functionality to return. Now, this is just my take on it, which nobody asked for, but we should be further along in the study of stem cells. But if I remember correctly, it was in the 90s and 2000s. Actually, I think it was 1995. Embryonic cells were being used. It was a whole thing, so the government actually banned federal funding from being used for the research. What's sort of messed up is we also have adult stem cells that could have still been looked at alternatively. And while that is being investigated, public opinion has not caught up as quickly as it seems. So I would say write your congressman, but I don't know, is the government even really listening anymore? Probably not. Anyhow, with stem cells, this differentiation process is the entire linchpin to explain what is happening here with Brundle specifically, not the stem cells, but the differentiation. Now, he is not necessarily composed of stem cells, but something is happening internally to him as time goes on. When he is first fused with the fly, this splicing is absolutely complete. This isn't just an issue of somewhere a fly existing within his body, this is on a molecular level down to his genetic coding. His genes have had fly genes superimposed into them. The question really has to be asked is, how are the genes affected? Not so much, why did he become a mosquito? Because, that part was pretty much inevitable based on what has happened. If we take a look at the cyclin genes, we can begin to ascertain exactly why he rapidly changed like he did. The genes in humans, known as CDK1, cyclin A and B, and CDC25C, are responsible for kicking the tires and lighting the fires for our cells to undergo cellular division. As this process begins in humans, it will typically take around 8 to 24 hours for everything like division and then growth to be complete. However, the process of division only takes around an hour or so. So in contrast with a fly, it only takes them about 8 minutes. You can kind of see, I guess, where this is going down, or what kind of path this is going down already. A fly lives about 100 days, whereas humans should live several decades, depending on their choices and just random chances. That's the part that kind of sucks. Random chance is one of our greatest haters. Flies possess these same genes, but somewhat altered. Their metabolisms are much higher than humans, and cellular turnover happens at a greater rate with humans as well, or than with humans. So here's also a thing. There's something known as the Hayflick limit. I believe it's like 60 to 70 times. Let me fact check that real quick. Glad I did. It's 40 to 60 times. I don't know where I got 70 from, but the 60 was right. Anyways, that means after that point, the cell has become so damaged from actually undergoing mitosis and enough of the DNA has been chopped off that it just really can't survive anymore. So the faster cellular turnover happens, the faster you die, essentially. But this means their aging process is also happening at an accelerated rate. From this, you can sort of extrapolate out from there that their need to eat is also much higher, sugar being something that they like as it's quick energy, when clearly Brundle was also doing this when he was having coffee with his sugar. Along with this, flies are also several times stronger than humans as well. So if you were to expand that out to a human-sized fly, you have something ridiculously strong, which we saw with Brundle's gymnast routine earlier. Essentially, what we are seeing with Brundle are fly genetics overlaid, not just with like some mitotic genes, but also with something like the MSTN gene in humans, which produces myostatin, the actin-3 gene, which also has shown to kind of impact and play a role in muscular strength. So even with the lower amount of genes present in the fly, Brundle has had the entirety of the fly genetics integrated into his genome. This new information would rapidly begin to change him, but we will get to that in a moment, because what I want to say is, why did Brundle get to keep his body and the fly didn't? It seems like Brundle genetics could have just easily been overlaid into the fly, creating a housefly that may have human traits. Was it luck of the draw, or the fact that nobody probably wants to see a movie from a perspective of a housefly? Who's really to say? That would have been hilarious, though. Spend millions of dollars on that. But the point here is, I don't believe there were any gene deletions per se. But at the end of that human sequence for, let's say, myostatin production, there would be a gene for the fly's myostatin production right next to it that would then go on to give more information as to how a cell should behave, and this is seen perfectly with the presentation of symptoms. And then also, you should know that the wings of a fly, the musculature and contractions of that, are actually the strongest in the animal kingdom. So when Brundle first steps out, he appears to be fine, if not a little more energetic. The MC4R gene would need to be heavily impacted, likely defaulting to like a higher rate of transcription brought on by fly genetics. And obviously, I did not tell you, but the MC4R gene, bit important, I suppose. It's basically a protein primarily in the brain that regulates energy homeostasis, how much you want to eat, food intake, and also body weight. So, and with all that, obviously, you're going to want to eat more, but you're also going to expend more energy. So it's kind of all, as you would probably guess, playing off one another. Now, the process of transcription is actually when a gene is read and then turned into messenger RNA that is created from that information. Translation is the process by which messenger RNA is then translated into a usable protein. Figure I'd go ahead and set that up because I'm going to be saying transcription, but it is at this point that the cell, at first being human, will begin to be overwhelmed by just the sheer amount of fly information being produced. And here's how the process looks. Almost seemingly randomly, Brundle was apparently created on the other side of this pod. Let's say it was like a 50-50 shot. At first, all of his cells, which were human, are created in their original form due to the fact that he was read as such. When he comes out, he's still largely human. However, the first symptoms of things to come is due to Brundle's injury from being stabbed by a microchip. When you are injured, your body quickly registers it as a real problem because the barrier has been breached. As a result of the injury, the mitotic genes are activated in this area rapidly in order to seal up the wound, which is why the actual fly hairs appear at first and well ahead of any other symptoms. This is because these cells that are more heavily impacted by damage are now dividing faster, presenting more fly aspects as they divide. The rest of the body is still on an increased timeline as well concerning mitosis, but not as fast as a damaged area. Given that the mitosis in a fly, depending on the stage of its life and cell turnover, would be around 8 minutes or so, and humans are around an hour for actual cell division and around 24 hours for complete cell maturation, let's go ahead and say for a fly, an hour is what they need for division and maturation. This would mean that Brundle's lifespan is dramatically reduced by human standards, but dramatically increased by fly standards, although I don't think flies care. Yeah, it's almost like he's something of a hybrid, right? So as time passes, the genes coding for specifically fly-related activities would continue to beat out the much slower human genes, as he would at first kind of begin to show his human form was struggling more and more. But the main problem is that the timing of the human genes to present are just not showing up in the bulk like the fly genes are, given the metabolism parameters. Now, the thing is, much like the lifespan increasing and decreasing depending on which viewpoint, the same can be said here. The metabolism of Brundle has likely increased as well by human standards, but has decreased by fly standards. However, the mechanisms which determine gene transcription and translation are still reading the fly genes at a decelerated rate, whereas they're reading the human genes at an accelerated rate. But the problem is just by natural biology, the genes from the fly are going to be read at a higher rate. It's just kind of how it, even it's slowed down. It's like, I don't know, you take 23 and 98, right? And then you decrease 98 by 5 and you add that 5 to 23. Well, now you have 28 and 88. Yes, math. Did I say that right? Don't know. Anyways, the point is that it's still higher even if you mess with it. So this is why Brundle slow turns into a fly. As the fly genes are being read more and more, the human genes are still being read, are presenting slower results, and that's why he's not just turning more human. Eventually, though, it seems the body structure becomes somewhat impacted, and this would seem to imply that there are two things struggling for control on body structuring: the established human form and the emerging housefly form. This would require activation of the homeobox genes, or the Hox genes. These genes determine body structure and transcription factors by being the master control of genes. In humans, once established, these cells are specialized. Some genes are harder to access, whereas others are freely transcribed, and the cells work in unison. That's basically how any of us are doing. It's how you're understanding me right now. And that's how I'm still 6 feet above the ground. It's how it all happens. But what appears to be happening here is, after the fly was entirely destroyed to create one being, again, maybe it's just a flip of the coin sort of situation, but the Hox genes of the housefly appear to be active. This would mean that the human form is the basis of the hybrid, but over time, as the cells divide, the fly's Hox genes would be critically altering the body structure. However, given flies have exoskeletons and humans have endoskeletons, the structure could never truly fully be changed, but it would result in deformities arising all from certain genes being read over others. Now, specifically concerning the fly's ability, the first one with the enzymes means that the stomach of Brundle would actively be producing this material in order to break down the tissue of others. Now, this raises an interesting implication, as it's not just all of the DNA of the fly imprinted onto Brundle, but much like how they were specialized, or there were specialized cells of the fly, so too is their specialization imprinted into certain areas depending on the location. So let's also discuss the exoskeleton. It definitely seems that the cells that form the epidermis in the fly are also imprinted into the epidermis of Brundle, and as a result, as mixed signals then runs off for a while, Brundle continues to have the material known as the cuticle secreted, which will then harden his skin and cause the outer area of the skin to fall off. Along with that, the actual skeletal matter, more so the jaw, would become largely vestigial like his teeth as they continue to fall out as well, and then eventually, it's just completely ripped off. It appears as though blood flow would be directed away from this area, causing the muscles and connective tissue to fall apart over time, much like how his ear also completely fell off. Basically, you have a human at its core with internal organs hybridized, and then more distal areas of the body, such as the skin and jaw, becoming more loosely connected because of the formation of the exoskeleton. Now, interestingly, it was probably more of the process itself that drove Brundle insane, but neurologically speaking, while behaviors of the brain may be impacted somewhat, a fly's brain, while not very, large, still has basically the same function: survival. So what was the shift in Brundle simply? Was it just simply because he had reached a point where, because of the degrading of his body, he was just driven insane? Or was it still coming down to genetic influences by the fly? I'll leave you to answer that, because for now, I think I'm going to wrap that up there. I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, then please leave a like as it gets the video out there, and subscribing also helps us finally crack 1.2 million subs. I gotta stop saying crack that, because it means something else nowadays. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, Roman Tales channel link, and other stuff in the description. Speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. At the astronaut tier, we have Kusith and Saucy Dub Socks. Thank you guys for your awesome support. At the astrophysicist tier, we have Death Dancer and Myura. Thank you guys as well. And at the scientist tier, we have Stutz, Frank Shaftcrank, I Actually Love Electric Cars and the Anglerfish, Metric System, Invictus Echo, and Official Texan. Thank you guys as well. And to the rest of my patrons, I really do appreciate y'all's support. It goes a long way towards helping out everything, keeping the lights running, and all that good stuff, so thank you. But alright, that's gonna do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.